portion of our lecture is immigration, no? The story of our roots. So here we'll talk about, no, ito yung napakagandang storya ni Noah's Ark. In a biogeographical sense, it's hard to really prove the Noah's Ark, no? But if you look at this map, there is a possibility, but highly implausible, no? If we use Occam's razor, the rule of simplicity in science, it's really improbable that Noah's Ark, the story of Noah's Ark, was true. In the sense that if you don't look at the certain marsupial geographic range, it is really far from where Noah's Ark was found, no? So those are the things you need to consider when you try to back your answer in that recitation. So those are recitations, no? Yung mga pinagsasagutan nating Noah's Ark, yung migration ng tao, yung Wallace line, so mga yan. It's a form of recitation for me. So I'd just like to pique your curiosity. So I'd like to challenge your views on how the immigration or how the movement of these different animals could have contributed to the Noah's Ark. No? Kasi sabi, di ba, lagi may pair of species that was in the Ark. So how did Noah accounted for all the species? And the map that I will most probably use in this sense of our discussion would be the map of your Dymaxion maps. No? These Dymaxion maps are actually really good in predicting human migration, or can be really helpful in mapping human migration, because it shows how weirdly connected the land masses of the world is. No? So the Dymaxion projection is it basically reshapes, no, how the globe looks like. You know? It shapes the globe into a 20-sided die. No? Then it shapes the globe into this 20-sided die, and it strategically cuts that die into certain portion to make the oceans and the continent into certain position that make it look like it's really connected, but it distorts certain things of the map, of course. So the Dymaxion map ends up making a land connection making a land connection that is continuous somehow, no? A more or less continuous strip. So it shows how interconnected the world really is, and sometimes it can be used to plot human migration. So the Dymaxion map, or the Fuller map, is a projection, of course. It's only a projection. It's not a true. If you want a map, a real map, use a globe, no? But it's a projection on a surface of an icosahedron, 20-sided die. So just credit to Buckminster Fuller for thinking about the map. No, the model of the map was actually created by Buckminster Fuller. So this is the Dymaxion world map. So the interesting thing here is how it reveals certain aspect of the Earth's geography, no? Especially important in the next discussion of human evolution. So the human evolution, the human journey. This is from National Geographic website. I have no copyright for this. I don't know why I'm using this. I'm putting my name on the line so that you guys can see this. But of course, I'm commenting on it. So technically, I'm not violating any fair use rights, right? So I actually want you guys to look at their website and see how accurate this is on their website, of course. So this is not mine, no? So this picture shows how modern humans have migrated out of Africa over 60,000 years ago, no? This map shows certain migration paths, no? It suggests certain migration paths. When we talk about migration kasi, in the context here, we'll always talk about migration. I will always say migration, but remember, I am pertaining to immigration, no? Immigrant workers. No, immigration. Just like the immigrant workers, no? When we say migration here, it is the movement of an organism from one area to another area or locality, no? And with the intent to stay in that area. Okay? So to live outside the certain origin before. Things like that, no? When we say migration, that's what we refer. The movement from one area to another area. So technically, we're not talking about migration. We're talking about immigration. Okay? There's a difference. But I'll use them interchangeably here. But when I say migration, I'm talking about immigration. Okay? So that's that. So, well, the first immigrant was not the Mexicans, no, not the Rohingyans in Bangladesh, not the Philippines in the Filipinos in America, not them, no. The first immigrant was, well, humans was the we are all immigrants if you think about it. We're all migrants, no. We are ancient humans who have originated from the African continent. And we just became widespread across elsewhere around the world. So it's a scientific controversy if you think about it, but there are a lot of evidence that support this theory. There are early fossil records of recognizable Homo sapien fossils were found on Ethiopia, approximately 2000 200,000 years ago, and then eventually we met some human ancestors like your Neanderthal and so on and so forth. So early humans are thought to have migrated across this area. No? It's either here from Ethiopian part or here in this region right here. So there are theories on, but there is a cross from your African continent. So we res- eh, we originated from this portion, and then we crossed the Middle East to Europe, to India. Indian continent was also important, pivotal story in the colonization, and then so to the Philippines, to the Polynesia, to the Micronesian islands right here, to Asia, to Japan, Korea, to the Beringia right here, and across the North American continent, to Alaska, to North America, and then we traverse this region up to the finishing point, the Chilean Peruvian mountains. Of course, there are a lot of causes or reasons for this movement of people, no? Both before until now. We have food security, wars, pre-industrial societies, environmental factors, food scarcity, occupying new environmental niches, and the need for resources due to overpopulation are most often than not the causes for migration of humans. And of course, there are profound effects of this migration of people because as people migrated in and out of an area, they can bring new plants and animals with them and also technologies that has a very profound effect on the environment that they are moving into or out to. Okay? So really there is this dynamics of what we call push and pull factors of influence to the humans to migrate. No, there's this positive and negative side to it. They can stay if the environment is kind enough for them. They can settle down, or if the environment is really harsh, they would move out. So if you look at how we have migrated to how we are now, it's like starting point would be Africa. No? We Well, scientists and archaeologists proposed that human Homo sapiens have started in Africa some 200,000 years ago. So we started in Ethiopia, the sub-Saharan Africa, no, below the Saharan desert, and we colonized the large majority of Africa. This is very large compared to this area, kasi, and we have colonized it for certain time. And we only moved out of sub-Saharan Rift Valley some 60,000 years ago, and then we crossed the choke point right here in Ethiopia, and then near Somalia too, and then or maybe here, some point here, but there's a desert kasi here, kaya baka hindi. But yeah, we transcended that to Middle East, to then we go to Asia, and then some parts of your Indonesia to Australia, and there's also a journey right here to the Philippines, Taiwan to the Philippines, and yep, across the Russian part, the end here towards the Berinja, no, right here, that where I'm always talking about. During the glacial times, we crossed this since there's a Berinja land bridge here, and then to the North American continent. We traversed that too, we colonized that too, and then the Mexico to the Florida coast here to the South America, no? The Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Peru, and Chile. No? And then if you look at it, it's like a finish line. No? It's a 21,000 mile walk for our species, and we have finished. Well, we can always go someplace else, but yeah, our species have gone through a lot of things. We have encountered a lot of other hominin species along the way. So yeah, roughly 200,000 years ago, we have originated from the East African Rift Valley to different parts of Africa, and then 60,000 years ago, we crossed the Ethiopia to Middle East, and then we make it to the top of the South America, no, 10,000 years ago. And this map is actually also a fuller projection. No? It's a circum global route. No? It shows the 21,000-mile walk that we had. How do we really know this is the case? No, this is the migration pattern that we took, the migration route that we took. So the first evidence for that migration route would be paleontological evidences. The presence of your hominin species, the bones of your hominin species, the presence of different hominin groups that have been found by your archaeologists, by paleontologists, and the presence of different tools that these early hominin groups have been using that time. So these are morely focused on the excavation that have happened. No? And if you look at how it is depicted, no, there are prime candidate of how human have migrated out of Africa. No? We have a northern route taken from the Saharan portion. No? So we are from the East African Rift Valley right here. Humans have originated here. We could have taken this route, the Saharan route, no? Okay, or we could have moved on the southern portion right here, and cut across this African horn, no? So that then we have to the Sinai Peninsula, and then to Indian continent, and to the Berinja. We have route to the Berinja, right here, and then to America, to the southern tip of South America, no? To Australia too, to the Philippines, and then to Europe, and then to different parts of Russia, Moscow. So these migration routes is actually based on, of course, the bones that archaeologists and paleontologists have found on these different areas, these different caves, these different excavation sites in Africa, in the Middle East, in America, all around the world, to kind of create a map of how we have migrated as a species and have colonized the entirety of the globe. No, so as you have seen in these figures, you can see and notice that the African savanna has always played a big role in the evolution of humans. And now that we have thousands of hominid fossils in the past 6 million years, they have revealed several phases in the biological evolution of humans. No? You have noticed that the early phase of human evolution would include species like your Ardipithecus, and whose anatomy allows it to climb in the woodland and walk with two legs. We see Australopithecus as the next phase of human evolution. No, Lucy as a representative of this, and she is a committed biped with a small brains, but still has big teeth for chewing and a big robust face. Their niche has expanded somehow, no, beyond the niche of Ardipithecus, but they consider more open habitats. No, they are found throughout the African continent. And then the third phase of human evolution, as paleontologists would call it, are what we call the early hominid groups, no, early Homo genus. And here we have a creature that is really a technologically advanced, in a sense, no, a technological primate that is dependent more on culture, on the use of tools, on living in these groups, no. And the presence of these stone tools, the use of stone tools in early humans have been a pivotal role in the, well, in our lifestyle, no, in the initial competition phase with scavengers and then with predators, and then it so happens that it broadens our diet and includes other, well, protein sources, and ultimately it led to the what we call migration or spreading out of the Homo genus. No, this, of course, this all of these skulls, bones that have been excavated would have a pivotal role to giving us an insight into the biology of our ancestors, no? The ancestors of the Homo sapiens. And it's a great illustration of how paleontology can really derive or get us some data and estimates or recreate, so to speak, the story of the human origin. No, we can learn about our past, how we became us humans. No, and that's what science shows that us. No, that like just like all other animals, we have a long evolutionary history, just like a four-legged animals that evolved from fish ancestors, then birds evolved from dinosaurs, ancestors over series of small steps, no, small gradual increments of evolution in a geological time scale. That's the thing about evolution. We evolved from a small-brained quadruped apes over a long time span, and now to the human species that is present all over the world today. Of course, there is that theory, no, that we are an African family, and the most recent studies and recent evidence for this, that we are an African immigrant, is that the presence of your genetic evidences. No, so this study suggests that we are an African migrant. Some 50,000 to 60,000 years ago, we began our exodus out of the East African Rift Valley to the Middle East, to the rest of the world. Let's just say that. No? So the African origin, this theory that we came from Africa is both supported by your, as we have mentioned earlier, your paleontological, archaeological evidences, and your, well, the most recent DNA evidences. No, if you want to take a look or want to have an evidence of migration or even evolution in itself, you don't need to look somewhere else. Just need to search within yourself, because within your cells, within your nucleus, are your chromosomes. Your chromosomes, your DNA, these are the evidence for evolution. Don't need to look somewhere else. Just look at your cells. Compare it to different cells, to different genes, to different chromosomes of different organisms. You will see your phylogeny, your lineage actually. No? So, yeah, both archaeological and DNA evidences support that we came from the African family. Africa, from sub-Saharan Africa, the East African Rift Valley, then we just migrated. No? And these genetic variations, if you look at them, we well, if you look at and compare the genetic material, the DNA of your chimps, or let's just say across different animal groups, let's just say that, no? When comparing the DNA of humans, of chimps together, there are only small portion of spelling differences. There are so small percentage. It represents a small percentage of our hereditary information that is different. If you imagine it, just 1 to 2% changes in the genetic material could produce this organism and this organism different from each other. Just 1 to 2% of that entire genetic material can produce that, no? Small portion of spelling differences in the genetic material can produce this totally different looking organisms, no? The human and the chimpanzee. A very small percentage indeed. That's why geneticists and scientists was, well, at all at first, because only a small portion of the genetic material is different, no? There are small portion of spelling errors, and yet with that small portion of spelling errors, you could produce a diversity of organisms that you can see. There are spelling differences. We call this spelling differences within our DNA. This we call them SNPs, no? Single nucleotide polymorphism. And it doesn't really encode for something, no? Most of these spelling differences are not even, well, not even producing any genes, no? Not in the genes that encodes for something, but they are in your DNA molecule, no? And these spelling differences can be used like a barcode or a molecular marker to trace how we as a species have diverged, no? We track these spelling differences. We track how people, what people group share, what nations or people group share that gene marker, and with that information we can track the common ancestor of us, where did we start, and so on and so forth, no? So if they share, of course they came from my common ancestor. So with just that single nucleotide polymorphism, if you compare them, these spelling differences can be used like molecular barcodes to trace different population of people who share the same spelling differences. So this barcoding, these spelling differences is actually important, no, to trace the history of that organism. So those are barcodes. And we can think of it as and convert it into what we call molecular markers, no? So you just look at these color squares. These can be used to represent DNA spelling differences, no? And these are your information that you will use to create your conclusion. If they share that spelling differences, of course, they may have originated from the common ancestor, from a common ancestor, no? So, group of peoples from different parts of the world may or may not contain the same spelling differences in certain areas, no? And the collection of these spelling differences, this colored square, will tell you, no, how how humans have migrated, our origins actually precisely, more or less, no. Mm. So if you look at this portion, it can reveal the different migration patterns or routes that modern humans, no, have taken during the exodus out of Africa. And this genetic evidence, no, shows that there are about 5,000 extended human families. And that, no, that 5,000 human families interestingly coincide with, well, fairly well with the number of human language families. That's why I love the study of language, especially the Bol people, the Com people. And not the study, but how language evolved. And the interesting part about how language evolved is its deep ties with the people. So remember that these migration routes, this overview of the migration route that our African family have taken was a result of the different studies, no, of the human subpopulation of these different peoples in the world, no? And by taking DNA samples from different race, or what we call race, or different human groups or populations of people, we have created this map of how we have colonized the entirety of the map, no? So as we have mentioned earlier, scientists use these what we call particular genetic markers to identify the very small genetic differences among human population throughout the world to reconstruct this migration path. And from a genetic viewpoint, there are over what 7 to 8 billion peoples on earth, and all of these people really, it comes to the genetic level, are a close relative of one another. We all descended from a small band of several thousand people who migrated out of Africa about 60 to 50,000 years ago. And the measurement of these small genetic differences among these living people, these extant members, what we call these subpopulations, these human groups, no, in these different nations of the world, illuminates and illustrates our human origins in Africa and our migratory path. So, say for example, in our exam, I ask you, what does this single nucleotide polymorphism mutation or these genetic markers that we have means to our population? What will you say to me? Or what will you use as an evidence for the migration pattern of humans out of the, well, sub-Saharan Africa? What will you tell me? Will you use fossil evidence? Will you use genetic markers? Will you use language groups? So things like that, no? And I'd like you to focus more specifically on these genetic markers, because these genetic markers and the next two types of the next three types of genetics marker that we will discuss are surely a more, in a technological sense, somehow accurate depiction of the migration pattern that happened. No, technological wise, of course, and also pay attention to the uh, plausible, plausible effects this migration could have give, no, to our and to the environment that we live in. For example, the introduction of species from one place to another. Of course, when humans migrate from one place to another, they bring the seeds, the animals with them as they go, as they migrate. And in that sense, we can link the distribution of different animal groups, especially the domesticated animals, for the cases of our dogs, for the cases of our cats, and most of our pets, to our migration patterns, no? And the horses too. So things like that. It can somehow, if you think about it, it makes the discussion really exciting. But in this lecture, I won't focus on that, no? But there are a lot, no? I just don't want you to get, I mean, overwhelmed. There are different species, and you can examine the distribution of that, not only in the broader sense of the world, but also in the context of the Philippine setting. We can talk about, the whole year, we can talk about the migration of birds, the distribution of birds, the distribution of different family of plants. Even I am not an expert on those plants. The distribution of bats, non-volant mammals, small mammals, so on and so forth. But yeah, you only need to have a grasp of these basic uh, concepts of population dynamics, this migration, this immigration, this dispersal mechanism, and a lot more, you know, to conclude the patterns. No? So these are the parameters that I was talking about way back in lecture 3 and 4. Okay? And if you want a harder example for this, we can use what we call the haplogroups. No? We have first one, the mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, or the human Y-DNA haplogroups. When we say haplogroup or haplotype, it is a group of alleles in an organism that is inherited together from a single parent. No? That's why we use haplotype. We kinda wanna delimit our analysis to a certain portion of certain genes. No, so these groups are, well, they are grouped into one another because they contain or they share a common ancestor that has that single nucleotide polymorphism mutation, that SNP. No? And since they have the same single nucleotide polymorphism mutation, you can conclude that they came from the same lineage, no? The same ancestors. So there is the mitochondrial DNA haplogroups and the Y-DNA haplogroups. So when you say mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, these are pure motherly lineage, no? So that's also a support of the migration pattern that we took from sub-Saharan Africa, the East African Rift Valley, to different parts of Africa, to the Sinai Peninsula right here, to Ethiopian portion, to Middle East, and then India, so forth, to Russia, Beringia right here, to North America, South America, the endpoint right here, to Australia, to the Philippines, to Taiwan, so things like that. Okay, so these different groupings are, well, they are groups, no, of similar SNP mutations, no, single nucleotide single nucleotide polymorphism mutations. So mitochondrial DNA is entirely motherly lineage, and of course your Y haplogroups are entirely paternal in lineage. No? So some prefer to use the human Y-DNA as a marker than your, well, mitochondrial DNA because of certain reasons. Scientists decide which one of these two to use in the depiction of the migration pattern, migration routes that human took in the, well, 60,000 years of their existence. I mean, after moving out, after the exodus from Africa. Well, scientists carefully choose which genetic markers. Well, most of the time they base it on how that genetic marker can accommodate for the disparity between human subpopulations. So, for example, your Y haplogroup, no, your Y-DNA frequency, the distributions of your Y-DNA haplogroups, as we call them, throughout the world is sharper than those of your mitochondrial DNA due to patrilocality. No? And since your NRY and mitochondrial DNA chromosomes cannot recombine, they are really good markers, no? Since they are carried in a haploid state, that's why we call them haplogroups, no? Since they are carried in the X and the Y form, they are really good markers, no? And they have this, the dispersive genetic forces act on them relatively quickly to change their sequences over population divergence from one another, no? And I know that there is differences in the distribution of sex chromosome variation, and it is not the same for these two sex chromosomes, no, these Y and these X chromosomes. And these human sex chromosomes, if you look at them as if an animated human, no, X and Y chromosome walking out of Africa, they have migrated across the globe in a different manner. That's how geneticists saw them, no? So they're like moving within the humans, these X and Y DNA. And they move across the globe in different manner than your autosomal chromosomes. Most likely because males and females have contributed unequally to the geographic expansion due to, well, different biological and behavioral differences. No, we all know that there are some males that, well, particularly in some cultures, there are what we call harems. No? And I mean that applies to your animals, but there are also examples in humans. No, like for example, the super dominant. If you think about Y chromosome and how it is distributed, look at Genghis Khan and his Y chromosome. His Y chromosome is the most distributed Y chromosome across the entire globe, no? Because there was once a time where Mongols conquered most of the globe. It was the largest empire in the world. And Genghis Khan and the Mongol culture, they have many wives back there then. So those things, no, it can complicate that's also the reason that's why there are sharper delineation for the case of your Y DNA. Since your NRY genes in your Y DNA is distributed by males, and sometimes these males would have sex with multiple wives, it would create a sharper distinction, no, across different localities. And yes, Genghis Khan was a really prolific breeder. If you go to Mongols, the Persians, the Middle East, in China, you can trace, or most of the time, you will see a man containing the Y chromosome from Genghis Khan. No, that's how prolific he is. So, if a new population is founded by a small number of males, no, especially for the case of human population, as we only have about 1,000 members or families back then when we move out of sub-Saharan Africa, you can have I mean, you would expect a stronger founder effect on the Y chromosomes, no? Especially when you have small numbers of male and large number of females. So things like that, scientists consider different things like that in, estimating how the migration pattern look like. But any of the three you would suffice, no? Even mitochondrial, even the NRY, YDNA, your gene for skin color, no? So things like that. So aside from those genetic markers like your mitochondrial DNA haplogroups and your Y DNA haplogroups, we can also use the genetic marker for skin color, no? Gene that codes for your melanin productions. And all of this talk about evolution, about humans, makes us really ponder on what really matters. What does it makes us as humans? No? What defines our species? And more often than not, when they hear the concept of evolution, and of course this ties with migration of the human species, as we encounter different hominin groups like the Denisovans and the Neanderthals along the way of our migration. More often than not, when people hear the concept of evolution, they have this preconceived notion that we came from monkeys. We're all familiar with this version of human evolution, that a primitive looking thing give rise to a slightly less primitive thing, giving rise to another, and then finally something like us, no? Something so advanced, a march of progress. Well, that's not how evolution works. This gradistic way of looking at evolution is not, well, it's flawed, no? This evolution is not a graded step ladder where you acquire an ability, become an X-Men mutant, and then become more advanced. And don't even get me started with the Pokemons. The idea that we're this inevitable walk towards this successful, dominant thing is flawed, no? We are not above the organism, no? We are not greater than these organisms, these animals, these other organisms here on Earth. I would like you to take a deep look into this. Because, guys, we are not the center of the world. Keep your head on the ground. Don't be a narcissist. Not everything is about us. The species around you did not exist for you. The chicken joy that you ate did not exist for you. Well, this is not entirely your fault. The Bible specifically says that we are to govern and rule all of God's creation. Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, over every living creatures that moves on the ground. Diba? Kung maalala niyo sa Genesis, it's not your fault, no? That's why, well, that's the exact same reasoning that led to the colonizer to justify their actions. That's why I'm more akin to our indigenous people's view of the world, no? That we're just a mere member of the land, and we are no better than the animals and plants that are in it. We do not own them or rule over them. They are free just as we are free. Because evolution and phylogeny, this lineage thing, isn't a tree that grows up to some march towards some ideal best species. We are slave through time, no? following the landscape carved out by natural selection, and always at the threat of extinction, and at the mercy of the currents, at the mercy of nature and space. Being complex and advanced doesn't mean you're successful as a species, no? If the purpose of evolution is for the survival of the species and for the continuity of life, I would say the most successful organism on Earth would be the bacteria. If, say, we go extinct by some catastrophic event, no, God hope, yeah, I hope not, no. I think these microorganisms will continue the life for us, no, and start the whole process of evolution again. If the purpose of life is to exist and to continue existing, then all forms of life that we see now, every insect, every plant, every animals, and every microbes, every shape and form, are as successful and as equal in the eyes of evolution and natural selection. Evolution is not a march of progress. Evolution is not like this because these forms are still here. They are still surviving, still existing, still fighting the disorder entropy is introducing to them. I'd like to think of life as a continual struggle and protest against the environment, against the harsh world, a continual struggle against entropy and death, that, that we are continually being chased down by this heat death, no? We are this struggle, and you should be proud of that, no? When you see death in the face, you see death face to face, you would say to him, "We had a nice run, huh? Hadn't we?" Then you say, "Good game, reboot, and start again." So the human story of evolution and our migration is really weird, no? We are not, it's not a simple linear march of progress that was popularized by the media. It is more complex than that. It is like a braided string, no? I'd like to introduce you to the evolutionary concept, the evolutionary model of the braided stream. So the braided stream is different from the common misconception, the media popularized march of progress, no? A single lineage of human evolution from stage 1 to stage 3, a less complex to a more complex organism, like a single stepwise gradistic ladder towards success. The braid stream models depicts evolution entirely different. The braided stream model accurately depicts all the processes that could have happened during the picture of evolution. It imagine evolution as a braided stream, no? A stream, a delta that flows with many branches and channels, no? At times, these branches might diverge from each other or diverge from the main body, but sometimes these channels might also get tangled up within each other or may cease to exist entirely, may join or recombine. So the braided stream model accurately or somehow merge the fact that there are these processes that could have happened, and it distances us from the idea that humans are the single extant member, the single most important member of the hominin group. It's not like that. We're just lucky that we're the extant species. But evolution is a lot complex. No? It doesn't really say a line of ancestorship. Evolution is a tangled web of branches of evolutionary biology. Evolution is like a braided stream, no? And we are just one end of that stream. We are just one branch, no? But we're not the only branch, no? Along the way, we have seen a lot of different hominin groups that have been evolving just like us and have met their end. And perhaps we're the only one that have been extant, that have been surviving, a terminal species. No? Others have split off, fade out. Because the idea of a march of progress makes us human, the story of humans, really weird. No? It makes us really strong. It's not the case now. If you look at the different hominin groups that have existed, we're not the strongest of the bunch. We're not the smartest of the bunch. But we could say we're kind of smart, but we're not the best, no? The best hominin groups out there. We're just lucky enough that we always live in groups, and living in groups offers protection, and that have made us survive. The braided stream model can put things into perspective. Can put things into perspective in the context that we are just as vulnerable as those other hominin groups are. We're not the best cat species, no? We are not the chosen species. We're just lucky enough that we survive. Certain chance events have lined up along our way to have to permit us to be this dominant, the only living member of the taxa. So that's the braided stream model for you. Using the braided stream perspective as an evolutionary model for as a model for evolution really can put things into perspective. Often we talk about humans and other animals. We always delineate us. No? We other ourselves. No, it's a form of othering. We other ourselves as different from these animals. But the truth is, we are animals, just like them. No? We think of ourselves as above or beyond, but we are just part of the animal kingdom. And I think the braided stream model can help us bring ourselves back into the perspective, no? That we are just like these organisms are co-inhabitants of this planet. But this is not sad, no? This is not really a downing to bash the human species. There are many myths about creation around the world. Most agree on one thing, no? That humans are special. And yes, we are, no? In a way. We need that special story, no? For us to have a sense of the world, no? Because we are the center of the world for in our own way. No? And we can have that special story in the sense of the evolutionary story. When you look at your own biology, you can tell the story, the special story of evolution. And it's the story. It is a story that we share with every other living thing. If you think about it, your idea, human bodies, your brain, your everything are product of evolution. It does remove some magic from being a human being, but it doesn't have to be. The grandeur in this view of life is that it is a different kind of magic. Evolution is a totally different kind of magic. That kind that still amazes you, even if you know exactly what's happening.